I have to start this video by talking about Star Wars Episode 1, the film. And I guess really what I want to say is my personal connection to this film is that it is this purely mad, unhinged George Lucas nonsense. And the raft of stuff that came out around Episode 1 was also all really, really weird. I already made a video about all of the PC games and the PC software that was released to tie into Star Wars Episode 1, and this stuff's crazy. It completely runs the gamut, and I love all of it. It's all so much fun. But here, nestled among these droid puzzle games, or e-learning games, or pod racing games, sits what looks to be the most straight up and down adaptation of the film. In a way, this feels like it's going to be the most boring game within the Phantom Menace software raft. But oh no, oh no, this is a weird, janky tank control nightmare, and I love it. So before we get into the game, let's take a look at that box. The Stoked era, as I like to call it, is really at the end of the big box era. But look at this one. I mean, mine's really tatty, but just look at that poster from the film on the front. I just think that is just absolutely wicked. We don't get this sort of physical interaction with the game anymore now. That's just a nice little tactile thing that I guess I miss in a way. The specs are pretty humble for a game from 1999. This is the year like Unreal Tournament came out, but this only wants a 200 megahertz CPU and a 4 meg graphics card, which is pretty good. That means anybody could play this, so that's a good thing. It's accessible. I will be ripping the CD-ROM from this box and playing it on a modern PC, but just so you know, for authenticity, I will of course be playing this game with the Jar Jar mouse. Real gamers accept nothing but the very best. Firing up the game, the first thing I noticed is the Big Ape ident. Big Ape were founded by Mike Ebert, who was previously a lead designer at LucasArts. He left to start his own company with a few ex-LucasArts employees. And I think what's really cool here is LucasArts very clearly had a good relationship with Big Ape. You can see from looking at the credits that LucasArts actually lent a lot of additional art staff to help get this game done. A lot of that help came from voice and music staff. We've got big LucasArts names in the credits here, people like Peter McConnell, Michael Land, Clint Bajakian. And also as I'm playing, I noticed a lot of sound effects that I recognised from Jedi Knight. I guess I should put up a spoiler alert here, because I will be talking about events from the game, which will also be talking about events from the film. So if you are one of the people who hasn't seen one of the most viewed English language films of all time, 25 years after its release, I would highly recommend you go and watch the film first, and then come back and enjoy the unhinged Phantom Menace PC tie-in game. I think the first thing you're probably noticing looking at this is the really, really high up third person angle, which is a little bit strange, especially when coupled with tank controls and turning your character by using the mouse. There is no strafing, it is very, very unique. I'm already completely enamored with this blocky, low poly 3PO droid, just brilliant. And then out into the corridor, like perfect, exactly like the opening of the film. We're chopping up some droids, doing some force pushes, deflecting some blaster bolts. Just brilliant, like completely love it. I've got the John Williams score blasted in my ears. I'm in, like I have got the vibe. Almost as soon as the action is over, the game completely slows down and it becomes more of a point-and-click adventure game. And it's great. You've got these little areas to explore, there's some buttons to push, some of which will, you know, open up secret items and drop out weapons. Oh yeah, that's probably actually the first big thing we need to talk about. Everybody gets to carry a gun in this game, so you get to be Obi-Wan with a gun, and that is just wicked. But yeah, some of these other buttons don't really do anything. They just kind of trigger a little sequence, or some of them just have like little screens of Princess Amidala on them. And I love that. I think that, coupled with the kind of zoomed out perspective, gives it this really toy-like aesthetic. It kind of makes me think about those Mighty Max style episode 1 playsets that came out. They did some for Star Wars, and then they did later in the 90s they did ones for episode 1. I don't know if you remember them. And for the most part it kind of feels like I'm playing a computer game version of one of those toys rather than a computer game version of the film, if that makes sense. And I don't know, I think it's pretty clear from early on that this is a game which is probably more designed for a younger audience than it is for kind of a grown-up audience. But I think that's great. You know, I'm having a great time running around interacting with the world here. All of the puzzles pretty much just come down to finding the right button, and good. And then, just as I'm lulled into a false sense of cozy security, droidicas! And then the game just sort of turns into a bit of a maze section, so you're kind of just navigating your way through these air ducts, trying to sneak through the rafters, trying to sneak aboard the droid transport, and before you know it, you're going down to Naboo. And I just think this one first level, the art style, the presentation, everything about it, I just think it perfectly sets the tone, perfectly sets the vibe. Just like in the film, our Jedi land on Naboo during the first wave of the droid invasion. Now in the game here, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon have got separated, and this happens a lot. This level is one massive maze. You're actually trying to follow Jar Jar so that he can take you back to the Bombad Jedi. And I have to say here, Jar Jar is voiced by our man Ahmed Best.
Mr. Jar Jar Binks.
Unbelievable, like absolutely adorable. 10 out of 10, flawless game. The camera angle, looking down on my little Obi-Wan, the coloured lighting as the sun filters through the forest canopy, reflecting off of the pools of water, it just has such a nice vibe. It's so cozy. The only problem is there are battle droids just everywhere, and they're really hard to fight. A lot of the droids are actually off screen, and this is a real arse ache, so you end up having to do this kind of thing quite a lot. There is actually a cheat in the PC version for a kind of first person mode. I want to say that it makes it easier, but really it just kind of makes it different. The slightly janky camera angle and the off-screen enemies do make platforming and jumping and exploring pretty frustrating for the entire game. In fact, even the game itself isn't very good at platforming. But really, this is only the beginning. Later levels are even worse. But I gotta say it, man, this is my bread and butter. This isn't even that weird for the kind of shit that I find myself playing. So, you know I'm just loving it. Once you've found the Bombad Jedi, following the story of the film, you're soon off to the underwater Gungan city of Otoh Gunga. And no doubt you've noticed that the cutscenes between each level, instead of being live action footage of the film, which would be completely acceptable, good even, LucasArts instead stood up an animation team for some excellently janky 90s CGI. I am just loving these cute, pixely, low poly renditions of these locations. I mean, I keep saying it's cute, but I mean, actually, this is pretty good for 1999. I would say 1999 is a pretty unfair year to release a PC game in. It's probably got to be one of the best years for PC games of all time. This game certainly isn't hitting the same level as Alien vs Predator or Tomb Raider 4 or Unreal Tournament. And in fact, just 2 years after Jedi Knight, it doesn't really even feel as sophisticated as that. But, as I mentioned before, I am guessing that this was conceived as more of a kids game, so in that regard, it really is a tidy effort. In the film, Otoh Gunga takes up about, 15 minutes? It's basically just Jar Jar getting a good telling off from Boss Nass. But here, Obi-Wan has to find the detention level and break Jar Jar out of prison before he's executed. Wonderful stuff. For the most part, it is just exploring the city, taking these little bathysphere precursors, talking to Gungans, and it certainly can't be a janky 90s action game without block puzzles or timed button puzzles. It even goes so far as to have some primitive dialogue trees, but adventure games are my jam, so I'm super glad to have these in here. There's some unique dialogue options which will give you some unique items, and there's even a few opportunities for a classic Jedi mind trick. There is a bit of the game where I got stuck and I couldn't figure out how to get past this guy. I had to look up a guide, and it turns out you have to fight him. The non-lethal way is to use a force push, but they get upset and they fight back. So you have to fight them. The other alternative is you can just kill them. In fact, you can kill them all.
And not just the men, but the women. And the children too. I slaughtered them like animals.
Absolutely unhinged. Brilliant. Just loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. Eventually, you get to the end of the level, you find Jar Jar, you bust him out of jail, you jump in the bongo, and off we go to Theed.
Excuse me.
The third level in the city of Theed definitely starts to add more bits to flesh out the story from what we got in the film. So here Obi-Wan is making his way through the city, and at first I'm just like loving the gardens, like it's really chill. I'm seeing this nice water, looking at these water lilies and these little fish, and I'm like, I want to get in there. And then I was like, hey, what the fuck is going on? This fish is trying to kill me. So I had to do the only thing that a Jedi would do in this situation, and I killed that goddamn fish. This level is tonally inconsistent, shall we say. It goes from these really beautiful, chill, ambient sections where you're just kind of walking through the gardens and you're having a nice time, and then these like punishingly hard urban combat pinch points. Which is mad. Like, this one level runs the gamut. It is like the most condensed Star Wars experience you could ever have. And I mean, you can hear in my voice. I love it. Tough urban warfare balanced against cute little block puzzles, and also unnecessarily difficult climbing sections. Just amazing. The Theed section ends with an escort mission where Obi-Wan is trying to help Queen Amidala escape from Naboo. Obi-Wan gets a rocket launcher, which is just even better because, you know, this section of urban combat at the end really, really whittles your health down. Droidicars are insanely punishing. And I will say, if I wanted to be critical of this game, I would actually say that the combat is just about the least interesting part of the game. It's not like it's hair-pullingly hard or anything like that. You know, you can save scum all the way through the game. It's more that it's just not that interesting. And actually, I think on balance, I would have preferred if this game had removed all of the combat entirely. I know by saying that, that's fairly contentious, right? I mean, it's Star Wars, it's in the title, so perhaps there is an expectation to be swinging a lightsaber or firing a laser gun, but I don't know, like, I think it just would have been quite cool just to move your little Obi-Wan dolly around Naboo, you know, just looking at the Gungans, exploring the streets of Theed, just having a nice time. I don't know. At the end of the level, you get to the hangar, and I'm just madly enamoured with those cute little N1 models. I don't even know what the word is for this. Like, I just love to see cute little low poly things. I think it's great. Before you know it, we're leaving Naboo behind us, and we're flying off to a little old place called Tatooine. It's one of those planets that's like well out of the way. You've probably never heard of it. Now these levels, they just keep getting better and better, and Tatooine adds some fantastic stuff into the mix. So you're chipping around Mos Espa, and again, I'm just absolutely loving all of these little locales. You can pop into little market stalls and have a chat with people. You can pop into cantinas and everyone's absolutely horrible. People come up to you in the street and start fights with you. If you happen to walk down an alleyway, there's even a chance that you'll get mugged. Luckily, good old Qui-Gon can use a Jedi mind trick to convince these criminals to leave him alone. Or you can just go absolutely bananas and murder everyone. The reality of this level is that it is one really long, really quite frustrating chain of events which are completely opaque. And what's worse is you can actually play yourself into a corner if you don't do the right things in the right sequence. So like in the film, the objective is to get the parts you need to repair Amidala's ship so that she can get to Coruscant. But in order to do that, you need to find Otoh. But you can't do that until you meet Anakin, and you can't do that until you meet Shmi. So there's lots of talking to NPCs, there's lots of exploring, and of course there's a wonderful appearance by my son, the Gonk. As I'm walking around, I absolutely love this guy here.
Better stand back, mister, cause I'm about to slash all my prices!
You know how Mos Eisley gets during Bunta Week.
Eventually you find Shmi, which means eventually you find Anakin, and he's voiced by Jake Lloyd.
You're a Jedi, aren't you? All Jedi carry lightsabers.
And I'm honestly, like, misty-eyed. Just hearing his voice makes me feel emotion, so loving it. Otoh is also voiced by the same guy, Andrew Seacombe. Andrew Seacombe always voices Otoh. I don't think anybody has ever voiced Otoh other than him, which is pretty great.
Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. Only money.
What follows is essentially like a Link's Awakening style trading quest where you need to get the right parts to fix up Anakin's pod racer. Now this is really, really hard because you can just die. NPCs can die, and what I haven't told you yet is that there are key NPCs that you need to be alive in order to complete the level, which it doesn't tell you, and you can just straight up kill them. You can even kill Anakin's mum, in fact. You can kill Shmi right in front of him. If you thought Annie went bad after what the Sand People did to his mum, imagine what would happen if it turned out that Qui-Gon had given her the incredible crash test dummy experience right in front of him. When I talk to my mates who have played this game, this is the level they remember. Because level 1, you're fighting droids, it's fine. Level 2, you're fighting droids on Naboo, and you can like kill the animals, that's fine. But this is the first time you can just straight up kill people. And I think this is what people remember the most, is I remember being Qui-Gon and just going ham, just absolutely murdering everybody. And this is just so, it just feels so right. It feels so fitting for episode 1, just to have such a mental level built in. Anyway, back on track. Next, instead of the actual pod race, you don't get to race the pod racer. Instead, you get this little precursor chapter where Qui-Gon needs to borrow money from Jabba the Hutt to bet on Anakin. So, of course, there is an arena clip where you have to fight a gladiator in an arena.
Wait, have we done this before?
Somebody has.
Right?
After that, you're then hanging out in seedy bars, you're buying drinks for patrons, making wagers with Otoh, and actually this is really great stuff. I thought this was like really atmospheric. There aren't that many Star Wars games where you get to hang around in seedy bars and cantinas. Chipping around all these familiar feeling locations on Tatooine, again, it was really cozy. I keep saying that word, but that's exactly how it felt. Being stood out in the desert watching pit droids going about their work, little R2 units chipping away with these tarpaulins just blowing gently in the desert breeze. It's just vibes, man. The chapter ends, as you would expect, with that fateful encounter in the desert as Qui-Gon faces a cloaked warrior trained in the dark arts. I have mentioned before that basically any bit involving combat is, firstly, a lot harder than it needs to be, but also secondly, just generally the least interesting part of the game. But fighting Maul for the first time here is when I actually realised that the lightsaber combat is a lot deeper than I had previously realised. All of a sudden, this surprisingly complex lightsaber combat like surfaced, and the game felt a lot deeper for it. So there's medium, heavy and combo attacks depending on how long you hold the mouse button down. You can stack up combos of those by, for instance, tapping the mouse quickly once and then following up with a much longer press. Plus you can add directional buttons into the mix while performing any of the following, which will then add directional attacks on top of that. And there are additional moves if your character is running or jumping. So when you add all that up, there's like 15 or 16 different lightsaber moves all told, which makes the lightsaber combat in episode 1 actually more sophisticated than in Jedi Knight, which would come out like 2 years earlier. So I take back what I said. The problem was me. For the most part, the episode 1 PC game has largely followed the story of the film, and maybe every now and again it slightly fleshes out some sequences or it embellishes some details which could have happened off camera. I guess what I find most refreshing is the game doesn't actually really bother with getting bogged down in accuracy or consistency all that much. You know, like killing Gungans and stuff. In the film, when Queen Amidala gets off of her ship on Coruscant, she goes straight to petition the Senate to send aid to Naboo. But in the game, she gets kidnapped on her way. So we get a bonus level where we get to play as Captain Panaka on his way to rescue her.
Welcome to Coruscant. How may I be of service?
They kidnapped the one person he would kill for. They thought an army of droids could hold him back.
We're being attacked. You must call the guards.
But you send that many, don't forget one thing. A good supply of robo body bags. If it's a mission no one can survive, he's the man for the job. Panaka, a Star Wars story.
It is so great to be able to play in the shoes of a more everyman character like this. Any representation for like a little side character who doesn't get that much limelight, I'm all about that. Panaka has no force powers, he can't double jump, but he has some sweet guns, and he actually has a surprisingly deep little set of martial arts moves in replacement of the lightsabers. Basically, it's just an absolute blastathon, and it's probably my favourite level in the entire game. It is a pretty short level, but most of it takes place in Coruscant's Undercity, so it has like mild shades of that underworld / 1313 energy. There's loads of like poor and homeless people down there too, which really throws into relief that this is the Jedi core planet. You know, it fleshes out that double standard that the seat of the Old Republic is also so rife with inequality. This is a great bit of world building which the films didn't even bother doing. This dude just approached me asking me for food, and then he got mad when I didn't have any. We got into a fight and I accidentally killed him. So then anytime I went to a new area, all the tramps would just call me a murderer and attack me on sight.
It's the killer! Get him!
So I guess what I'm saying is that's how I became a mass murderer of homeless people. But anyway, I rescued the Queen. I delivered her to Palpy. The plot from the film plays out. And what's really good is so much happens in the film here that they obviously couldn't have made a CGI cutscene. They just made a second crawl in the middle. Brilliant. So the droid army have continued their attack on Naboo, and we're jumping to the third act of the film now with the big assault on Theed. The final chapter of the game tracks back and forth between you playing as the Queen and as Obi-Wan. Amidala and Panaka are together fighting through the streets of Theed in order to retake the city. It's doing that Halo thing that I call There and Back Again, where you're just playing a level from earlier but now you're just doing it back to front. It is just as hard as when you try to escape the city with Obi-Wan. There are tons of droids everywhere. Amidala's little lightning gun there doesn't do a lot of damage, but what it does is it short circuits the droids' programming, effectively making them an ally for a little bit, which is great. Panaka's gun, though, is an absolute sledge. It beasts those droider cars. And then you get to meet Obi-Wan as he and Qui-Gon take on Darth Maul. We have the hangar sequence with Maul revealing his double ender for the first time, and then we're off into the power generator room complete with all the ray shields and the metal gantry. In the film, when Obi-Wan falls off of this, he just does a big massive jump back up. But here, he has to navigate an outrageously difficult platforming section, including whole sections of ludicrously difficult jumps. Save scumming is absolutely required. And of course there's block puzzles throughout this, but there's actually also a really cool little button puzzle when you get to the ray shields, which is quality. Meanwhile, Amidala is working her way closer and closer to the throne room in order to take back control of her planet, eventually finding the Viceroy in her chambers and forcing his surrender.
I surrender.
Obi-Wan then rejoins the lightsaber fight just in time to see Maul make a succulent Qui-Gon shish kebab. And it's funny because I did this bit twice, and both times Qui-Gon was already lying down. I love a janky game. Then you've got to fight Maul by yourself. You can struggle against the lightsaber controls here. This can be a bit of a challenge. You can try guns. Sometimes this does work. But what's really funny is sometimes you can just force push him down that big pit in the middle. Rolling credits on this one was absolutely great. This is another one of those games that I had heard was like capital B bad, and then I played it and enjoyed everything about it all the way through. This was great. One thing that I will say is this game could have really benefited from vehicle sections. A little submarine section would have been great as you're leaving Otoh Gunga, or getting to fly an air speeder on Coruscant, or one of those cool little gun platforms on Theed. All of these would have been really, really good. Apparently there were vehicle sections actually planned, but they had to be scrapped in order to get this game to ship on time. A pod racing section, of course, on Tatooine would have been amazing, but you know, there's like a whole game for that, so that's fine. Probably surprising nobody, the Phantom Menace sold gangbusters when it released. 500,000 multi-platform sales on both sides of the Atlantic. That certainly isn't that bad for 1999. One of the things that I like most about this game is the voice talent. Qui-Gon is played by James Warwick, who played Qui-Gon in all of the other games around at this time. And Obi-Wan is voiced by Scott Cleverton, who also played Obi-Wan in a lot of the games, but is probably most famous for being Carnage in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. Amidala is voiced by Grey Griffin. She is a real voice superstar. She was Ventress in The Force Unleashed and Tartakovsky's Clone Wars. My only real gripe is that Banaka isn't voiced by Hugh Quashie, but is voiced really, really well by Jeff Coopwood. The rest of the voice cast is made up of really quality voice actors. These guys are LucasArts mainstays. We've got Kevin Michael Richardson, Nick Jameson, Bob Bergen, Carolyn Seymour, Greg Berger, Heidi Shannon. The list just goes on. LucasArts clearly were putting a lot of money behind this and a lot of effort into the sound and music. Although it sold well, the game was panned. GameSpot gave it 4 out of 10. CNVG gave it 1 out of 10. Some reviews weren't quite so bad, but it's fair to say that the reaction was fairly polarised. But whenever I've spoken to anyone about this game, in real life, all I've ever heard is positivity. Usually it's something like, oh yeah, I had that game as a kid. I had no idea what I was doing and I got stuck loads, but I loved how you could just wreck all the Gungans, you know? And I know a lot of you who are watching this now are going to say something like, I have really great memories of playing this game. Or you'll say something like, this game was my childhood. And honestly, I'm relying on you. Help me, comment section. You're my only hope. If I were to make a big umbrella statement, it would be, we just don't see stuff like this anymore. Star Wars has recently had a period where it felt like a lot of the kind of weirder, rougher edges were being sanded off in order to make something which, you know, had wider mass appeal. There were no tie-in games for any of the new films or any of the new Disney Plus shows. And the new games, good though they are, and they are extremely highly polished, and they don't seem to take as many risks. They don't poke any whompers. All of the CD-ROM stuff that came out around episode 1 is just so weird. And I love the fact that this particular area of Star Wars was so happy and so confident to be weird. I'm not one of those people who cares about canon. I just care about the vibes. And I think that's my overall thoughts coming out of playing this game. New Star Wars games are great. The way that all of the new canon hangs together shows such a tremendous amount of effort and hard work, and truly that is fantastic. I've got no bones to pick with anything in modern Star Wars or modern games or anything like that. But just for a moment, I'd like to remember a time before Star Wars was a $70 billion franchise. I want to celebrate a time when it was a loosely connected series of books and games and films, all of which was a whole lot sillier, a whole lot wackier, and didn't care as much about being consistent, or dare I say it, good. They just went, and that is never bad in my book. This game isn't for sale on PC currently. I didn't know before making this video, but the PS1 version was actually re-released on PS5 recently, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I got this running on a modern PC. I ripped my own CD-ROM, which I have uploaded to the Stoked collection on archive.org. There are links in the description. I love talking about weird, old, janky games that you might have missed. I actually missed this game first time around. This was a new play for me. One thing that I love about making these videos for this channel is we get to explore our personal connection to these stories. We get to share it with other people. We get to share our thoughts on it. And my main thought coming away from this is I think it's about time we started getting some bizarre Star Wars games again. Thank you very much for watching all the way through. If you want to see more videos about old Star Wars games and old PC games, check my previous uploads. If you would like to see your name here and would like to help support the channel, there are links below to places where you can become a channel contributor. Thanks again for watching. I had an absolute blast making this one. I'll see you all in the next video. Alright then, ta-da.